Help is on the way for the Iranian people, says Uncle Sam. U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Iranian demonstrators to keep protesting and take names while help is on the way. He also announced that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on trade with the United States. Meanwhile, Iran has said the situation has come under control and that it's keeping communication channels with the U.S. open while being prepared for either dialogue or war. What's the situation on the ground? What are the underlying causes of the protests, and how is the U.S. offer of help viewed by the great majority of the population? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. I'm pleased to be joined from Tehran, Iran, by Foad Izadi, Associate Professor at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies, from Xi'an in northwest China's Shanxi province, Wang Jin, Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at China's Northwest University, and here in the studio in Beijing, Zhang Gong, Professor of Economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. First of all, let's go to Professor Izadi in Tehran. Obviously, communication is again, well established. It seems the signal is clear enough. Please brief us, Professor Izadi, on the situation on the ground. Are things calm, and has the situation been stabilized?
Yes, in the last 3, 4 nights, Tehran has been very calm. I've been going out every night and nothing happening in Tehran. In other cities, more or less the same. On Monday, we had millions of Iranians coming to the streets protesting against this domestic terrorism that the country experienced and protesting against Trump and Netanyahu. It seems what Trump wants to do is to repeat the Libya experience in Iran, start bombing Iran with the excuse of supporting human rights. People of Iran remember what he did in June, attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations. I was on your show in June and I learned something from you. You mentioned that the name of operations in June was Midnight Hammer, and said that Trump took that hammer and smashed the negotiating table. And this is a quote I've been using since that time. This is the very correct
Wow.
terminology. And this is the second round of those attacks. In June, we had Israeli F 35 jets attacking buildings in Iran. Now we have Mossad agents on ground doing basically the same thing, burning buildings, burning cars. And this is not my analysis. We had Mike Pompeo just a few days ago sending New Year greetings to the protesters, quote unquote protesters, and Mossad agents walking alongside with them. And he's not allowed alone. We had Jerusalem Post having an extensive report on how Mossad is present. So this is another American-Israeli operation. The hope that Iranians have is that with the demonstrations on Monday in opposition to American-Israeli plans, they would not use military force on Iran again. I think it would have severe consequences. So generally, things are calm. The plans of United States and Israel did not succeed. For the second time, they're interested in a regime change operation, and they're not successful. So they have to plan again.
Professor Wang Jin, let me go to you, because if you read the press, both international press and the domestic press, you seem to get the kind of sense of urgency. Something is about to happen in the next, hours or days maximum, that there will be a tipping point, some kind of intervention, some kind of strike is going to happen to the United States. It seems that from Professor Izadi's accounts, the situation is pretty calm. Which one is closer to reality?
Well, I think Liu Xin, both of the assessments are, I think, are correct because on the one hand, if we're looking at what is happening inside Iran during the past two days, we all witnessed it very clear that the Iranian government successfully controlled the situation and bring the very fragile situation into the much more peaceful scenario. I think it's a very good success. But also on the other hand, we cannot forget that even inside Iran, there was still some kind of riots and unrest certainties might emerge. And also outside Iran, as you mentioned, Liu Xin, that some countries, particularly the United States and Israel, they are still trying to threat Iran by the so-called new waves of strikes. And also just 1 day ago, I mean, just maybe 24 hours ago, that the United States imposed new sanction measures, try to threaten any countries who has the business connections with Iran. These countries will be imposed or be added new 25% tariffs. So that they hope to further isolate the Iran government, to further sanction Iran's economic systems. This would give new pressure towards Iran. So that's why I think, as you mentioned, that the next maybe 24, next maybe 48 hours, we might witness new measures taken by United States, maybe from other political ways or even the military way, which we don't hope it will happen. But I think the situation will continue to transform. So that's why we should wait and see what will happen.
Professor Gong, what is your assessment, despite the relative calm in the situation in Iran? Is the United States still looking poised to strike?
Well, my understanding is that there is intense debate within the Trump administration. On one side, you have these traditional sort of neocon candidate people who are very much thinking about starting a war with Iran. This came from the first Trump administration. This plan has always been on the table, and it's inherently tied to the interests of Israel. Keep in mind that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu went to Washington, I think on 29th of last month, that's the end of last month, to talk to President Trump, and the intention is very clear to me that he's trying to persuade President Trump to start another military operation in Iran. But on the other hand, there's also those people within the administration, noticeably, for example, Vice President J.D. Vance is very much against the idea of another intervention overseas. Adding up, the recent action in Venezuela. You're making people starting to doubt, what about President Trump's America First policy? Is really America First? I mean, you look at the things he has done over the last year since he's come into power. There's been fairly large amount of interventions, altogether 7 bombings overseas so far, right? And I think even more concerning issue is whether this military adventurism, I call it military adventurism, will lead to another forever war, which is something President Trump is totally against, right? Are you going to, bomb Iran, start a war? And even, to the extent of even a regime change, and then you have a total mess in Iran, and Iran has the potential to become another, another one of those failed states, and it's another issue that America has to deal with. This is not in America's interest, clearly, even from Washington's perspective. Certainly, it's in the Israelis' interest, that's for sure. So I think there's an intense debate within even the mega group of policymakers and influencers. People like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson have come out openly announcing their position against this kind of a thing. And it's reported that J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, is also very much against this idea. So I think they're still debating. A decision hasn't been made. And I also want to point out, as the situation in Tehran and Iran in general starting to calm down, I think the likelihood of a military intervention is just waning and waning.
Professor Izadi, help us understand the situation. So you had the shop owners in the Bazaar in Tehran who closed their shops in protest because of the depreciation or the sharp depreciation of the Iranian currency. But then there are the riots we're talking about. But then we have very much nationwide, in Iran's words, millions strong rally of ordinary Iranian people in support of the country. So what's the overwhelming public opinion of the Iranian people at this moment towards the Iranian government, towards their economic policy, but also towards Western intervention? What are they saying? Potential Western intervention.
Yes. Majority of people in Iran are affected by this economic warfare that Iran has been experiencing in the last 47 years. These sanctions on Iran are illegal under international law. The US Congress can dictate to American companies whether they should trade with Iran or not. But when the US Congress dictates to Chinese companies or Russian companies or German companies what they should or should not do, that is violating these countries' sovereignty. And sovereignty is one of the main principles of international law. So Iran has been suffering with economic sanctions. About 2 weeks ago, we had some shop merchants, some people who were dealing with foreign currency that had peaceful demonstrations sort of opposing this currency fluctuations, and which is very reasonable. Both the Iranian president, other officials, even the country's leader, said that these are very legitimate concerns. They had representatives, these merchants. They had meetings with the country's president. If you look at the videos when people are marching peacefully, there is no problem. Protest in Iran is not illegal, and it happens occasionally. But what happened was that this monarchists in Washington thought that this is a good opportunity to restart that regime change scheme. And Pahlavi, the former Shah's son, is leading these efforts. His father came into power through an American British coup d'etat in 1953, and he wants to become Iran's king through an American Israeli military intervention. And he's encouraging President Trump to attack Iran militarily, which is a very major question. How can you be a country's king and you're asking a foreign power to attack your country? This is very strange. So this is the situation that we have. I think we have passed the difficult points. The Mossad agents on the Iranian streets, I think, are packing and they're probably going back to Tel Aviv.
Having said that, Professor Izadi, let me stay with you. How precarious do you and your fellow Iranian countrymen judge the situation? Do you fear that the United States may be launching another military strike on your country in the next, days or if not weeks?
If you pay attention to Trump's statements in the last 48 hours, he is actually more hawkish because he realizes that the regime change plan, is not really working out. He's encouraging people to come to the streets. The more he encourages Iranians to do that, the less he is going to be effective. Because although some Iranians may have difficulty with the economy, they realize that if Trump and Netanyahu are rulers of Iran, the Iranian economy is not going to flourish. They know what happened to Libya. They know what happened in Syria. We have Israeli experts on Israeli television saying that if Iran's government falls, Israel is going to start bombing Iran the same way Israel bombed Syria after the fall of the Assad government. And people see these pictures. They remember that Trump and Netanyahu are not interested in human rights because they just finished killing 70,000 people in Gaza. they engaged in a genocide. So having genocidal rulers dictate what Iran should or should not do, everybody understands it's not a good idea. Trump is interested in oil. That's why he is kidnapping the Venezuelan president. He is trying to basically control the oil flow from the Persian Gulf. Uh,
Okay.
for He likes oil and he wants to put pressure on countries like China by
Okay.
basically having a leverage on countries that have an independent foreign policy.
Um, Mr. Professor Wang, let me go to you. We have heard comments such as help is on the way. Demonstrators keep protesting, and then we have the European leaders tweeting about the brave Iranian people. Obviously, they're not talking about those who came out in support of the government. They're talking about the people who oppose the government. All of this sounds very familiar to me, because when there are, so-called pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong or in other parts of the country, in other countries who dare say no to the United States, you would hear similar comments from the United States, boosting the morale of the protesters. Are we seeing the same playbook playing out here in Iran? And ultimately, what is the vision, what is the dream of some people who are trying to, encourage the protesters to continue protesting?
Yes, Liu-Xin, I really totally agree with you, because I just finished my visit in Tehran just 1 month ago. And I can feel, let's be frank, I could feel very strongly that the Iranian people are facing the very strong economic difficulties, that's for sure. And just as mentioned, as Professor Izadi mentioned, that there were a lot of dissatisfactions and hope the government could do something. So that's why the peaceful demonstration started. But these demonstrations cannot be viewed or understood as Iranian people's desires to overthrow the government. It cannot be can't be considered as Iranian people's desire to bring the intervention from other countries, from United States, from the Western society, or from Israel. It also cannot be understood or considered as Iranian people's agreements to make their country collapse or to dismantle their country. So this is something else. We're talking about something else. So that's why when the United States express some very slogans or very assessments with a very slow political, I think, the features, they hope to dismantle the countries. They hope to intervene the countries with their own political and diplomatic designs. So that's why I think we should trust the Iranian people and the Iranian government. They could find a way together. But the very precondition is that without any kind of the foreign intervention or the foreign kind of the measures that would penetrate into Iran and try to make more crisis inside the country. So that things should not be tolerated.
Professor Gong, let me go to you. What is your take on what we are seeing here? Because I want to see with clarity the big picture, what's happening, who are driving what to happen here. I don't want to be bogged down by the details as to when, which country is going to strike, how they're going to strike, whether it's cyber attack or it's, and what about the Iranian nuclear negotiation. To me, it all seems to be details that are not fundamental to what exactly is happening here.
Okay, well, you mentioned a couple of issues. First of all, I want to point out that there's a broader background that the Iranian economy is indeed in a very difficult time. I mean, this is partially the result of decades of sanctions imposed by the United States. I think that there's a big reason behind that. And certainly, people undergoing this kind of a hardship are not very satisfied. You see the currency being depreciated very rapidly, inflation is going up, and it's very understandable that people are not very happy. Given the hardship of life, right? Now, when it comes to America's intervention, I think this is a very, at least I think, I view Trump administration's policy towards this. I mean, this is a very optimistic kind of thinking to think about intervention here. And this is totally nothing to do with the institutional change in Iran, reforming Iran. This is purely out of geopolitical consideration. This is purely out of consideration for Israelis' interest. I think people in Iran probably fully understand that. This is not something out of goodwill, but this is something that in other countries' interests and can potentially lead to something disastrous. Libya is a very good example, right? It's a failed state, and years and years of even worse hardship than the regime was toppled, before the regime was toppled. So this is actually, it's not going to be working out well for people in Iran. Now, the third thing I want to say is that America's and Israelis' demand for Iran not developing a nuclear weapon has further expanded, actually. It's reported that now they're talking about ballistic missiles. Netanyahu wants to dismantle Iranians' capability to develop and produce ballistic missiles. So, as you can see, as the country weakens, the demand further expands. I think whether this is in line with international law, I'm not sure it is. America has this tradition of doing things unilaterally. The tradition of doing things, taking advantage of a country's weakness from time to time. So I think all of these things working together. So probably the Trump administration is indeed thinking about a regime change in Iran, but he's actually also weighing against the cost. He is, as we understand, he's very much against getting into a forever war in a foreign country.
Professor Izadi, I want to hear a bit more about your assessment of what could be the consequences on the ground for Iran and for the region if there would be a U.S. military intervention in the region. What would be unleashed?
There are a couple of things that we should make sure that we understand. One thing is that the people who support Pahlavi, and this is an joint operation between him and Israel. He visited Israel 2 times in the past year in the middle of genocide, something many Europeans don't do. The first thing is that his popular support is extremely low because people of Iran remember his father. They remember his father was one of the most corrupt rulers of the 20th century. If you look at old Amnesty International reports in the 1970s, Iran was number 1 in terms of torturing political prisoners during his father's time. This was the only thing that Iran was number 1 at internationally, torturing political prisoners. They plundered Iran's resources. They stole a lot of gold and jewelry when they left Iran. This is how he has been surviving for the last 47 years, basically using the stolen money that his father took out of Iran, the money that belonged to the Iranian people. Iranians remember that. That's why, Tehran has a population of over 10 million people, and about 3,000 people showed up during the height of the request that he had for people to come out. So it's a tiny, tiny minority. In other cities, the people who showed up are even less. So that's number 1 point that we should remember. The other thing is that if you look at Western media outlets, they're basically doing what they did during Libya war. The Libya model is that you start bombing the country in support of quote-unquote human rights, and you balkanize, disintegrate that country and steal its oil. That's what happened to Libya in 2011. And Western media outlets are exaggerating the number of deaths, and they are quoting the media outlets of Pahlavi. So these media outlets say that so many people were killed, and then this is quoted by Western media outlets, not mentioning that the figures are coming from Pahlavi sources. They have some media outlets, they have some so-called human rights organization.
Yes, a US-based human rights group.
Yeah, they say it's US-based human rights group because Pahlavi is US-based. So it's technically correct. But if you're based in the United States, it doesn't mean that your figures are correct. you look at what Trump says every day, exaggerating all the numbers.
Professor Izadi, since you mentioned the casualty number, we read a report that was coming from Reuters earlier today while we're preparing for the show, and it actually says there is only one line. It actually says that an Iranian official told Reuters that the death toll was over 2,000, but nothing else, nothing more. Who was this official? Under
Unnamed.
what circumstances? Unnamed, yeah. So,
yeah. You know, this is what Reuters did in Libya. They are basically trying to justify an attack on Iran if Trump decides to do that. I'm not sure if Trump is planning to attack Iran. It would be foolish for him because I think Iranians are not going to be surprised this time. We are not in the middle of negotiations like last time. And Iranian leaders have said that the Iranian response is going to be quite severe. Personally, I think if Americans attack Iran, at least 500 soldiers locally.
But how prepared and how strong is the government of Iran to withstand any second military strike? I mean, last time Iran didn't stage any significant counter measure, let's say. How about this time, especially when the economy is such a shape? How ready, how prepared is Iran to withstand any potential strike from the United States? Professor Izadi.
My understanding is that this time Iranians' response is going to be much harsher because they realize that if attacking Iran is cost-free to the Americans, they keep attacking Iran as they have done in other countries. Last time, when during the 12-day June war, we had this rally around the flag effect among Iranians. Many people who did not like government policies didn't like their country to be attacked, infrastructure to be attacked. You know, we lost over 1,200 civilians during the June attacks. And we are seeing a similar thing. I went to the demonstrations on Monday, and the crowds were at least 2 times bigger than what the government gets when they have these announcements or these rallies. So we have a lot of people realizing that although they have economic difficulties, they realize that what the U.S. wants is to separate the old rich parts of Iran, put a puppet government there, and then the rest of the country without access to oil money would be poor. So this is how they want to dominate the Middle East.
Understood. Yeah, understood. Understood. Professor Wang, we have very little time left. Let me go to you here. What do you want to remind our viewers, given the prevalence of Western media reports? What must we keep in mind to have a clarity of the situation? Very briefly, please.
Well, I think the most important thing is that although there were many kind of the versions of the press, but the key things is that we have to remember: the Iranians people want peace, the Iranian people want stability, the Iranian people want a better life. That should be all these things should be constructed upon the unity among Iranian people themselves. So the key right now is not to provoke much more crisis. The key right now is to how to find a way out for the Iranian people themselves.
Professor Gong, very briefly, the 25% tariff, how seriously can we take it?
It's not very serious. I don't think it's even clear whether this 25%.
So it's a joke. It's a bluff.
It's well, at least from as far as China is concerned, it's definitely a bluff. It's not even clear whether it's additional tariff or it's actually already existing tariff. We're paying over 25% tariff anyway, and I don't think Washington has any appetite for engaging in another trade war with China. I think China is definitely not one of those crappy little countries that the United States can throw against the wall. I'm talking about the leading principle that has been used as a foreign policy guideline.
Double check before you take anything seriously. Anyway, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Foad Izadi joining us, Professor Foad Izadi joining us from Tehran, Wang Jin joining us from Xi'an, and John Gong joining us here in the studio. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. As usual, follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. We've got The Point.